Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to speak at the Global Action Forum, which is really a great way to bring together leaders from business, nonprofits, and academics to talk about some of the lessons and challenges that we've all faced during the last year and a half during the COVID-19 pandemic. My goal is really to focus on our specific context, the challenges that we had at Vanderbilt University that were typical of the challenges that many universities faced during the COVID-19 pandemic. When we started having to deal with all the challenges that COVID brought, we faced really a tremendous challenge to our overall model of operating. Universities really have operated in a similar feature for over a millennium, really. I mean, since the founding of the University of Bologna in 1088, we have seminars, they had seminars, we have lectures, they had seminars, they had labs, maybe they did alchemy there, and we're doing more interesting things these days. But fundamentally, the way we learn and do research as part of a living learning community hasn't dramatically changed really in 1,000 years. It's tried and tested and it's working very effectively. But of course, the challenges that the global pandemic brought forced us really to change our operating model overnight. So literally over the weekend, we had to move towards a full online education, and I'm very proud of how we did this, but really everybody, staff, faculty, and students were coming together. And then we had to decide, how do we handle the pandemic long term? It became very quickly clear that one of the main challenges that COVID brought to us was really the lack of information. There was tremendous uncertainty, and that uncertainty and the facts on the ground changed very rapidly. So when we thought about how to approach that, we had to be clear that we were dealing with profound and persistent uncertainty. So our approach to that was to go back to our mission, our purpose, our values, what we're all about as a university, and then adopt a decision-making and communication process that was in line with the challenges of persistent and profound uncertainty that we were all facing. So on the mission side, that meant we are a leading research university, and we believe in the power of residential education. So on the research side, that meant we needed to get our labs open as fast, as quickly as possible. And we were able to operate already back in April of 2020, of course, subject to physical distancing. The labs were open at about a third capacity. We built whole plans of how faculty, postdocs, and students could work together. But it was that very strategy to open our labs as quickly as possible that led to many of the breakthroughs that we're now seeing in our fight against COVID-19. Vanderbilt has always been a very distinguished place dealing with infectious diseases. Dr. Barney Graham, who was so instrumental in leading us towards the Moderna vaccine, was a faculty member here at Vanderbilt. Mark Dennison played a very important role in developing some of the antiviral drugs that we're now using. And Dr. Jim Crow was one of the leading researchers on antibody therapies. Both of them are now involved in the fight against COVID-19, and the antivirals from Dr. Dennison's labs and the antibody therapies from Dr. Crow's labs are a very important tool in the fight against COVID-19. We're also very renowned for our clinical trials. So being able to get our labs as quickly up and functional was absolutely essential. And then on the other side, we're a residential college. We believe in the power of residential education, where we can really realize the full potential of our students. And that meant we decided to invite all our students back on campus. We had about 85% of our students back. More than 50% of our classes were taught in person. The remaining 15% that couldn't join us were largely international students that couldn't gain entry into the United States because of visa restrictions. And so that required us to have an entirely different approach of how we invite our students back to campus. We had to change how we house them in residential colleges and residence halls. We had to have a whole system of wayfinding with one-way streets and roundabouts. We had to change our approach to dining, moving from a cafeteria model to a grab-and-go model, and. It required the total focus of our entire community to come together. Staff worked countless hours. Faculty had to prepare two types of classes, in person and online, and then switch in order to be able to switch back on them if necessary, something we never had to do, but it was something that our faculty had to prepare for, and they had to adjust to new teaching techniques, such as the ability to have hybrid classes when some of the students either were in quarantine or isolation or couldn't join us in person in the first place. And then it was our students that all had to come together, step up, and be committed to do the right thing when, let's be honest, many thought that they couldn't do it. When you look back to August 2020, the media coverage on universities reopening was very negative, but we demonstrated that with a commitment to a common purpose, we can operate a campus safely and effectively and in line with the purpose of the university. We showed that this could be done if we come together as one community. And Vanderbilt throughout the entire pandemic was the safest place in all of Tennessee. We never had a single case of transmission in the classroom, to just give you one example. And then the second component was we had to communicate effectively. We had to be engaged in approaching this fully understanding that people would be fearful, they would be concerned. And so we focused on the communication. It was transparent. There was really focused on understanding what are the types of questions that our many stakeholders had. And of course, parents and students have different types of questions than faculty, for example, or staff. And so we engaged in a lot of town halls. We did a lot of communication via video, via conversations on the ground, via Zoom. All of that was critical. And then we did it all over again when we brought students back in the fall of 2021 in light of the emerging Delta variant. So transparency was number one. Second piece that we really focused on was to make sure we had the relevant expertise. And here, our partnership with the medical center and our own School of Nursing was really essential. Dr. William Schaffner was an incredible partner. Dr. Jeff Balzer, head of the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, played an enormously important role to make sure that we were aligned in our approach and that our approach to the pandemic was always based on science and the best health information at the time. And then we were committed to finding solutions. Doesn't mean we always had them right away, but we usually would say, we're working on it, this is our deadline, we're gonna come back to you. And everybody, I hope, had a strong sense that we would work tirelessly to find new solutions to emerging problems, and we did. And then the last point, I think, which is sometimes underestimated, is empathy. It's very important to realize that people are afraid, they may have lost loved ones, they may be concerned for the members of their family, and this is a very difficult time with all the strains that COVID puts on all of the members of our community. So I think for leaders, this is very important in this case to really connect at a personal level with their own people. And I, for example, invented this little tool which I called management by Zoom bombing, where I would show up unannounced in the staff meetings, thank people for their tremendous work, and then we had a couple of minutes for discussion, for questions, and I was very touched by many of these stories that I heard during these meetings. So the need for transparency, expertise, a commitment to finding solutions, even though they can't be found right now, and a sense of empathy were 4 dimensions that guided our communication all the way through. And then we adjusted our decision-making process because we understood that the challenges of a rapidly evolving understanding of the disease and the disease itself required a sense of adaptability, where we would be able to shift our approach in line of new information. For example, we changed our testing regime multiple times. And we told people that that would be the case. It's not a mistake or a problem, it's just the reality on the ground. And you have to have decision-making processes that candidly look back on what's working, what's not working, and then adapt accordingly. And then the last thing along the lines of decision-making, we were very clear that in an environment of tremendous uncertainty and a lot of volatility and change, the value of waiting is very high. In other words, we made decisions when we had to, but not earlier. This is an important thing to keep in mind, because what that allowed us to do is to learn from new information and also what others were doing, and then make the decision with the best information available at the time when we had to make it. So we were very intentional in our communication and in our decision-making processes. But at the end of the day, what really mattered was that everything that we did was driven by our mission and by our purpose and by our sense of what is it that Vanderbilt is all about. And I think that's to me is the biggest lesson, and a lesson that I want to take forward as we move now towards hopefully a time when we can put the pandemic behind us, that everything that we do is based on sound communication and decision-making processes, but fundamentally guided by a sense of purpose and mission. So I hope you enjoyed participating in this wonderful event. Thank you very much.